I'm going to briefly look at the context of the Algerian War of Independence. Now, there's been a lot of research published actually in the past 5 years. There's someone called Arthur Azaraf who's written a book on, I think, radio in Algeria. And Frantz Fanon, who we looked at, is in our video, so question one, briefly as a post-colonial theorist. Post-colonialism is the study of impacts and the continuing impacts of colonialism. Looking at this through a critical lens. So he's extremely famous, and he would be a good person to look at if you're interested in the Algerian context. And he's written in 1959 that the radio receiving set develops the sensorial, intellectual, and muscular powers of man in a given society. And actually, in this context, he says that at the beginning of occupied Algeria, so Algeria had been colonized by the French for over a century before it fought a long and violent and drawn out process of a war of independence in the mid 20th century. So they talk about how actually in this context, he talks about how in this context, radio in occupied Algeria allows for domination as a form of rule. And it's a way for colonizers, the French, to show to everyone that they are present within the society. And in many ways, this does make sense. I think that for us, the most comparable example are television sets, which have news broadcast through them. Not that many people use radio nowadays, and actually not that many people get their news through the TV, but it's a way, if you tune in to certain TV programs, they'll give, the government opinion, and they'll show this to every single person in the country or outside of the country at the time. So like Anderson says about imagined communities is a way of creating a national shared identity. But in this context, it's a way of transmitting and imposing a French identity upon a colonized country. So there is so in the War of Independence, and there is a source for this as well before we turn on to the next slide, there is actually a lot about how these radios ended up being used by soldiers to not by soldiers, sorry, by the Algerians themselves, who actually ended up being able to take these radios, which had initially been used to impose an identity upon them, and they became used, in fact, to create their own kind of identity by transmitting news that the French did not want shared among the population. So this is really interesting, in my opinion, and one way in which you could think about how the radio is a sonic medium that transfers sound to people. And it's significant in this context because it acts as a form of revolution and rebellion while creating a national identity. And of course, radio is not just about music, but in the context of colonial Algeria, there were a lot of patriotic songs that were transmitted through the radio.